Okay, well, it's 7:05. Just want to get going this evening. Good evening. My name is Megan Bond. I'm the chair of the Environmental Caucus up here in Senate District 3 in International Falls. For those of you who read the Star Trib on Friday, you heard a little bit about our city council, perhaps. And yes, it was worse than it came off in the article. So anyway, I just want to say a couple special hellos this evening. Oh, there's Maria. Um, I just want to say a couple, where am I going? Special couple of special hellos this evening in sorry, I'm just trying to look at this, that we have our former communications director, one of the founding members of the caucus. Kristen Larson is here. I know she's taken some time away, but it's wonderful to see her back. And then also straight from the fabulous DNC in the state of Michigan, we have Michelle Dietrich. And if we could, Michelle, are you available just to say hi real quick and introduce yourself since you're here this evening?
Yes, I am. Hi, Chair.
Hi.
I'm Michelle Dietrich. I am the chair and founder of the National Democratic Committee's Council on the Environment and Climate Crisis. I love the work that you do in your caucus. It's amazing under Megan's leadership, and before that, FIDA. And I am really looking forward to this update and learning and listening. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here, Michelle. It's really a pleasure and privilege to have you. Okay, so we'll just get going. I'm not going to spend much time tonight talking because as these legislative forums have been, we're going to leave it to the experts and our legislative chairs. So I just want to say thank you. Here's our quick mission of the Environmental Caucus: to educate and mobilize citizens of Minnesota to address the climate crisis and protect, preserve, and restore the natural environment. If anybody has questions for our speakers this evening, we usually try to moderate it a little bit. I'm probably going to turn off the chat. And why don't you just message me directly? And then when we have openings and availabilities to do questions, I will do that. And that's just tends to make it easier. And then if there's extra time at the end for questions that we didn't get to, we can do a whole, excuse me, take the remainder then, excuse me. I apologize. So either way, I'm going to hand it off to the two most effective and active legislative co-chairs of any community caucus in the United States of America, Vita Conis and Greg Layden.
Well, thank you, Megan, and thank you to everyone for being here. It's wonderful to see all our guests and our wonderful panel. We have quite a program tonight, so I'm just going to get going here. First of all, I want to welcome our wonderful panel and thank you all for joining us. It's really been an honor for me to be able to spend time at the Capitol and get to know you all and learn so much from you, sharing your expertise on how to navigate all this. And it's been wonderful. And so Greg has been working, but he takes what observations I have, and then he's been sending out those wonderful Substack emails to you all to keep you updated with our weekly happenings. So we work together as a team, and it's been great. So thank you. But tonight we have Representative Patty Acom, who is, of course, the chair of the House Finance and Energy and Policy Committee, with us, and Sarah Maradian, who is with CURE Minnesota, and Peter Wagenius with Sierra Club, Ivana Stark, Clean Water Action, Maria Jensen with Recycling Electronics, and Matt Dahl, our own vice chair, who is also with MAP, Minnesota Environmental Partnership. So again, I want to thank you all for joining us. And our program tonight, the intention is to really try to go through some of the important omnibus bills that are now moving through the legislature, and talk about what we want to watch for, what we want to keep, things we want to get removed. I know several people were testifying today about bills. Peter was there, and Ivana and Lori, who's on this call. So there's a lot of just new information that we all want to be as informed as possible. And we're going to be doing a call to action to ask everyone to please make phone calls, and if possible, do lobby visits to your representatives and to some of these committee members as these things move through. So our first thing we wanted to talk about was tracking omnibus bills. And Patty is going to get us started with this, with like what's going on now, Representative Acom, with these bills. And I made a little chart, but I can get rid of this if you would like, or we can keep it up if it's helpful.
Actually, it's kind of helpful, so I thank you for that. So if you're good with that, let's go ahead and leave it. Hi, everybody. I'm Representative Patty Acom. It's great to be with you. I just really appreciate this group of people and the passion around working to protect our environment here in Minnesota. And I think it's incredibly important, especially this year, with the closely divided chambers. And so there's a lot of things moving and not all in good directions, in my opinion. What I will say as far as kind of tracking bills or keeping, an eye on where things are at. So, just to set the record for the House, currently, my energy bill has been referred to the Ways and Means Committee, the Finance Committee in the House. But the bill that was referred was really just a placekeeper. It was not our intention for that to be our end of session bill, but we needed to make deadline. So it got sent as just a placeholder while we continued to negotiate. And it's been challenging. My co-chair in the Energy Committee, Representative Swedzinski, if you've been paying attention to our committee this year, his real issues have been around ratepayer relief. He wants to roll back the renewable development account. He wants to do some things that don't necessarily make sense from a renewable transition position. So we have struggled to come up with an agreement. There was the week before, so we were off last week for our legislative break, and there was a moment in time where I thought we had an agreement, and that got rolled back. But we and unfortunately, over break, co-chair Swedzinski was not negotiating. And so we still have not yet come to that place. I think ultimately I feel good about the position that we are in, because really where we are right now is what we want to do is play defense, and we want like a lights on budget bill only. We are not, I don't want to try and horse trade policy. I think that it makes most sense for us to really be protecting what we have done and keeping the agencies going. And so I feel like we have support from Speaker Emeritus Hortman and Majority Leader Long. So both former chairs of the Energy Committee and have an eye on this committee and working hard to protect it all the time. But so really that's a long way of saying I'm not sure when the Energy Committee budget bill will be heard in Ways and Means, but that's the next step in our process. Today we heard the first round of budget bills in Ways and Means, and I sit on that committee, so that's great. So we heard agriculture, we heard legacy, and no, I'm already forgetting, but so that process has started. The agriculture bill, for example, was sent to the House floor, where it will be debated, I would imagine, coming up pretty soon. And after it's been heard on the House floor and heard on the Senate floor, then it will go on towards a conference committee to fix any differences that the two bills may have. In the energy sector, we have an interesting situation, because I would describe the Senate energy budget bill as really a Republican bill. And I think that the Chair Friends had hoped to have a bipartisan bill, but I think he missed out on the DFL part of that bipartisan bill. And so I say that a little tongue in cheek, but also finding it very concerning. What I'm kind of hearing through the grapevine is that there's been a lot of pushback. And so I think that comes because of advocacy and speaking out that so many of you have done, that it's likely it will, it may be divided and have a budget bill and then have a policy bill. And if it's my hope that we have literally just a budget bill, that will be a whole lot easier for us when we do finally get to that conference committee place, to not have all of the really bad policy that the Senate currently has in their bill. So I think that while the only thing I haven't really touched on here is the taxes piece of this, and the only tax piece that I want to maybe just mention a little bit is that those of you, again, if you're paying attention to the Energy Committee, know I have a data center policy bill, and my data center policy bill is by no means intended to be a pro data center bill. It's intended to be, if we're going to be giving tax incentives to these really large for-profit corporations, that there darn well better be some ratepayer protections involved. There better be some protections for our environment, and there better be a way that this is providing a benefit to our community. And so that's the only, so it's because we aren't going to be able to be pulling policy through in our committee, the only way that that bill will probably go anywhere is if it gets attached to the tax bill. So that's my only touch on taxes, I think, for this convo.
Thank you. All right. And Sarah, you have been testifying in a lot of detail about that Senate bill. Would you like to speak to it?
I sure would, and I'll just actually use your slides if you don't mind, Vita.
Okay. Let me move forward so you've got that.
Thank you. You can go back one. You
Okay.
started there. Perfect. Thank you. Oh no, we're still. There's like an in-between slide between this one and the. There we go. Yeah, stop right there.
Sorry.
Perfect. All right, thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Sarah Meridian, Government Relations and Policy Director with CURE. For those who don't know, we're a rurally based nonprofit. We do a lot of work kind of at the intersection of rural places, and people and communities and the environment. So yes, I've been very involved in reading through the Senate Energy Omnibus, and there are several things that we're concerned with at CURE, and I know that a lot of our partner environmental energy orgs are also concerned with. So we'll just kind of go through some of those. The first one here is this free pass to these mega, we call them hyperscale data centers at CURE. So folks probably already know there's a lot of interest in data centers. I think the Star Tribune is reporting now 11 that have been proposed, potentially could be built within the state. So we have a lot of concerns at CURE. I think there's a lot of unanswered questions about the energy use we're talking about, water use. Where is that coming from? Do we have enough water in the communities where these would be sited? Where are they being sited in communities? Right next to neighborhoods or more in more of an industrial district? Labor requirements. Are people being paid, living wages, those kinds of things. And then also, as Representative Acom just pointed out, this kind of question about tax breaks. So the bill within, or the provision within the Senate Energy Omnibus does none of these things, doesn't address any of those. That bill, this provision of that bill was written by and for Amazon Data Services. I think it's really important to be extremely clear about that. That is not speculation. That is absolutely correct. That is true. We know this. They came to the Senate Energy Committee and said as much. So the bill is essentially Amazon wants to build a data center up in Becker. And to do so, they want to have emergency backup generation. They're thinking that they want to build 250 diesel generators. The capacity of that is about 600 megawatts, if you need a comparison. And if you haven't heard me say it already, that's about the size of the Monticello nuclear plant. So they want to kind of circumvent this certificate of need process. So normally, any type of energy generation, especially one of that size, would need to prove that this is needed, that there is no alternative to this specific type of generation. So they want to circumvent that process. The Public Utilities Commission told them, nope, you got to do the certificate of need. But we're still here in front of the legislature. So in addition to kind of circumventing that certificate of need process, these provisions in the bill also allows these emergency backup generators that are running on diesel to undergo minor review. So for those who were on last year for the permitting reform bill, that's kind of like the second tier that was sort of created. And within that is a what I would characterize as kind of a less detailed type of environmental review. An environmental assessment is what needs to be done there, not an environmental impact statement. And then it also allows for local governments to explicitly allows local governments to use alternative urban area-wide reviews, which they can already use, but this is just a little bit more explicit about it. And there are concerns that historically AUARs have been used to kind of, again, skirt some more direct and detailed scrutiny. So that's about data centers. Then we've also got a provision that would completely sunset the community solar garden program. And so that's a program that's really popular already. Thousands of Minnesotans already participate in it, and it allows folks who can't afford their own rooftop solar, or who maybe like me are renting and so can't put solar on their roofs, to still participate in this kind of just transition. I know that the Department of Commerce has a report out that I'm sure I can find a link to and provide later, that estimates $3 billion in net benefits to the state from this program, and in addition to another 1.6 billion for developers, who then of course ideally give that back to the communities as well. And their report specifically found that the benefits of this program are significantly higher than any costs. So this is obviously would be a huge loss. Then we've got these carbon-free definition changes. So obviously in 2023, the legislature passed the 100% law. So again, 100% law says that an energy source is carbon-free if it generates electricity without emitting carbon. That does not mean low carbon. That does not mean net zero. That does not mean renewable. It does not mean clean, and it does not mean eligible energy technology. I think it's really important to be clear about that, because we've heard some legislators use those terms to kind of say that these amendments or these provisions that we're going to talk about in a second are acceptable changes to the 100% law. But the fact is that none of those things are carbon-free. That definition is not ambiguous. It is in the law. So the Senate Energy Omnibus would include B100, which is pure biofuel. Usually it's made out of soy, for use at peaking plants for the first 400 hours every year. So that would count as, so a utility that has a peaking plant that runs on B100, the first 400 hours, they could count that towards their 100% compliance goals. Then, and I assume I don't have to tell this group that there are concerns with water quality, soil quality, air quality, things like that with biofuel at the scale we have it in this state. Then we've also got this other provision that was added as an amendment 2 weeks ago that would include wood chips, wood waste, and importantly discarded wood products as 100 as a carbon-free resource. But of course, when you burn biomass, carbon is emitted. So this is just kind of a bigger issue. We saw a ton of bills this year come through to try and carve out exemptions to 100%. So those are just 2 examples that made it in, but there are many waiting in the wings. Next slide. Okay. Thank you. All right, and this is a lot of information, so thanks for hanging in there with me. So then we've got part of the bill that would really weaken net metering. So net metering allows those who can afford and have rooftop solar to receive credit on their bills for excess energy produced by their system and then provided back to the grid. So currently this applies to investor-owned utilities like Excel, municipal utilities, and rural electric co-ops like Great River Energy, Dakota Electric for folks kind of in the cities area. But the omnibus bill would eliminate the availability of net metering for munis, muni customers, and then rural electric co-op member owners. And it also reduces the payment that folks would be getting. So it kind of makes the payback for, you know, having solar on your roof a lot harder over the long term to get. And then very concerning, this renewable development account, this was added as an amendment 2 weeks ago during markup. And so oh, I'm getting some feedback. I can mute them. That's the good news. All right. So this program or the amendment would essentially sunset the renewable development account in 2025, and any remaining amount that's in the account at that point is then required to be paid back to Excel customers. So that's a lot. And then finally, we've got, again, I think this was, I'd have to double check if this was an amendment or it was in the language, but the Senate Energy Omnibus does include a change to the existing eligible energy technology language so that all hydropower of any size counts as an eligible energy technology. So there's some environmental concerns with hydropower, and then also some environmental justice concerns, especially up north in Canada. So that was a real quick whirlwind tour, but those are kind of the biggest issues that CURE, and again, like I said, a lot of our partners have identified with the Senate Energy Omnibus. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And oops, I'm muted.
Nope, we can hear you.
Okay. I was going to say one of the frustrating things, as Matt wrote in the chat, is that for some of these things to get added, there had to be DFLers serving on this committee that went along with it, which is very disappointing.
Yes.
So our hope is then that Patty, when we get to Ways and Means, or is it going to be in conference committee where we can hopefully get rid of some of this stuff? What is our best chance to get these things out of here?
I think that what may be considered bipartisan in the Senate is not considered bipartisan in the House. The House DFL stands firmly in protecting community solar gardens, protecting net metering, protecting the renewable development account, and, you know, on and on, protecting the 100% bill and our goals to get there. So I'm not sure why why there are a few Democrats in the Senate who are choosing to support these bills. But in the House, we are strongly opposed to those, and we will not waver. So if they come to us in a policy bill, we will vote no.
Thank you. And we've seen you guys hold together in vote after vote. It's been great. So thank you. Matt has his hand up. Go ahead, Matt.
Thanks, Vita. Yeah, I just wanted to add on the Senate side, these bills, I believe, are all going to have to go through the Senate Finance Committee chaired by John Marty. And he has made it pretty clear that he does not want to see a lot of policy in his budget bills that come through his committee, sort of like the House is doing. So we'll see if that can play a factor. We've also heard that the Senate DFL caucus does not want to pass a bill that doesn't have 34 DFL votes. So if we can hold the line on some of these things, when it comes time for negotiations, we can hopefully keep them out of the final deal. But we really do need to keep up the pressure on so that there's not, you know, sacrifices of these things for the sake of something else.
So our action alerts are going to be for everyone to email your rep, your senator, and let them know you don't want this in there, right? Hold the line. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right.
I have a couple questions that came in, if I could put them in while they're still pertinent to the discussion. Thanks. So first one is from Deborah Huskins, and it's for Sarah. What are the reasons given to support repealing the community solar gardens program?
That is an excellent question. I will be honest, that's not my forte. I believe it's a lot of a cost thing. Actually, if Matt has raised his hand to save me, I will gladly accept his help.
You bet, Sarah. Yeah, I was watching that committee hearing, where that Senate Energy Committee kind of got went off the rails a little bit. But that was one of the things that was mentioned. My understanding it is in theory a cost issue. Chair Friends kept saying, we need to bring rural Minnesota along. I didn't really understand his logic for why that means we have to get rid of community solar gardens, given that they're most of our solar in the state. But I think his argument is it's a cost thing, but I don't think that really holds up.
Can I just maybe make a comment on that? What I will say in hearing some of the opposition to community solar gardens is they talk about this cost shift, and they say that all of the ratepayers are left paying an extra price for those people that are participating in community solar gardens. And that isn't true. What they're forgetting is they're only looking at one side of the ledger. And so they're not looking at the other side, at all of the other generation that isn't needed to be built, because we have these distributed solar resources. It adds resiliency to our grid. There are so many benefits that come environmentally, to our grid, to our whole system, from the community solar garden program, that it's not a fair analysis of the situation. And to be clear, in the very first years of the community solar garden program, they were allowed to have a pretty high rate for savings for the people who were subscribing. And so they were somewhat expensive, and they did that as a way to really attract people to the program, to try and develop a solar community here in Minnesota, to get developers to start wanting to do business in our state. They knew it was going to be a temporary situation, and that they would, once the program got established, they would revise that rate, which they did. And so those first couple of years of the program are looked at as quite expensive. And then after that, it became much more reasonable. And then just back in 2023, we updated the program to make it even more so. And so over the years, the criticisms of the program have been the cost and the fact that it is not very equitable. It's not reaching low and moderate income Minnesotans. And so we worked really hard to build in changes to the program to make it more affordable or less expensive, and would allow more people to get involved. And I will say, Chair Friends in particular looks at how much it costs per kilowatt hour for community solar, for rooftop solar, and then for utility solar. And utility, just by size and so forth of scale, they can be cheaper per kilowatt. And so his rationale is really that, why would we be doing anything but the cheapest when we need all the solar? Well, I think we need to be doing all of them in order to get the outcomes that we know we all need to reduce climate change. And so there's some different philosophies that are driving his, in my opinion, flawed arguments.
And then Representative Acomb, this question for you or anyone who might have the answer, but just someone's asking if you could clarify what would happen if the energy and environment budget and policy were separated, since so much of the Senate side is, so much of the policy on the Senate side is objectionable. Would the hope be to just kill it and not pass any policy as mentioned? And then the kind of follow-up to that specific would be, is that why, or a separate issue of your data center policy needing to go into the taxes omnibus?
Oh, I'll start with the second question first. So the data center bill, knew we weren't going to be able to get it out of committee because everything has to be bipartisan, and the Republicans are laser focused on the bill that Sarah spoke about just a few minutes ago. And so they aren't interested in making sure that we have ratepayer protections. They aren't interested in making sure that we're protecting the environment, and they aren't interested in making sure that we're developing this community benefit program to build energy efficiency throughout our state. So I knew I wasn't going to ever get their support, and I didn't want to weaken the bill just in order to get their support. So we figured it probably made more sense to try and if the bill is going to go anywhere, it's going to be because the tax bill has something to do with data centers. And if the tax bill doesn't have any data centers, then it's unlikely that we're going to get this stuff passed. But we did break out the environment and water permitting piece to run separately, and that is running in the Senate too. So there are some hopes that we can get at least some of the environmental protections in place. And then the first question, and I forgot it already, Megan, sorry.
Not a problem. If you could just clarify what would happen if energy and environment budget and policy were separated?
Yeah. Thank you for that reminder. Yeah, so because in the House, it looks like we're gonna likely be just base budget only. If in the Senate, they divide those out, it's gonna make it easier for us to do our budget. And I think honestly, this year, the most important thing we can do is to pass a budget so government doesn't shut down. So that's been my number one priority. So if they split those out, that will be helpful to get the budget passed. And in addition, if they pass a lot of this bad policy in the Senate, then it can come to the House and we can stand strong and vote it down.
Okay, this is really helpful to know what is going on and how you want to work this in terms of us just how to advocate and help to know if we can at least get the budget through, then there's a lot of work that needs to be done. We didn't get huge capital stuff done last year, right? So there's a big need for that, for capital improvement projects especially. Excellent. All right, Megan, Greg, do we have any last questions we want before we move on here to environment?
I think we're good.
Okay, thank you both so much for all your help. For environment, Bill, we have Matt Dahl with MAP and Marie Jensen, who is with the recycling, and also Ivana Stark with Clean Water Action. Matt, do you want to start with kind of an overview, and then maybe we can turn it over to Ivana and Maria?
Beta?
Yes. Yes.
Would you, before we move on from energy, can I just say one thing while Sarah
Yes,
Meridian
please.
and
Go
Representative
ahead.
Kim are still here? I think with this group in particular, it's important to be really clear about one thing. Patty Acom and the House are the heroes of the story, and the Senate Energy Committee, chaired by the Nick Friends, is the villain of this story. You might wonder, how on earth could it be the case where we could end up with a energy bill from the Senate where Democrats have a majority? It could be so unbelievably bad compared to where the House is coming from. And so I think it's worth understanding who is on the Senate Energy Committee. I was going to put the link to the Senate Energy Committee in the chat, and maybe I can't do that. Can I do that?
Yeah, you can. You're a co-host. So it's Nick Friends, John Hoffman, Haaschild.
Yes.
We have Jen
actually,
McEwen. Go ahead.
Yes, and I just want folks to know that Jen McEwen, Tu Jung, and Scott Dibble voted against adding all of this terrible stuff, the Senate energy bill. But you would think in a committee that was 6 Democrats and 5 Republicans that there would have been 6 votes against everything. The problem is there are only 3 votes against everything because Nick Friends, Matt Klein, and John Hoffman voted again and again and again with Glenn Grunhagen and all the Republicans. So in terms of just accountability, I'm understanding why are we in this position? Because 3 Democrats voted the right way and 3 Democrats voted the wrong way. Jen McEwen asked for division, so we have pictures, which we're going to share after session, of showing these 3 Democratic senators voting with the 5 Republican senators again and again and again and again on every single one of these items. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear to everybody, because we have some work to do to get Democrats, 2 of whom are in the metro area, in blue districts, to appreciate that they can't take the environment for granted the way they currently are.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, point very well taken. It was very frustrating to be in those committees and watch those votes.
It's probably worth noting that that's actually why we have community caucuses, to have this kind of policy discussion where we can push from within respectfully and still try to elect Democrats, but we have to be the pressure that happens inside.
Amen.
All right. And we will do it and continue to do it with your help. All right. Matt, do you want to use the slides or you have your own? What would you like to do to get us started?
No, we'll just stick with your slides, I think.
Okay, awesome.
I'll go back to the
Do you want to share or shall I?
I'll go for it.
Okay.
We'll just stay consistent.
All right, got it. Wait a minute, desktop 2. Okay.
Yeah, so on the Environment and Natural Resources bill, I'd say it's overall, like it could be a lot more objectionable. I think there are still some things we don't care for. The wild rice bill, unfortunately, has been watered down quite a bit, but we still hope to maybe keep moving that forward, at least as a talking point. Not convinced that a whole lot of policy will pass given the House the way it is. But the wild rice bill basically introduces a bunch of new protections for wild rice, including on pesticides and other major threats to the plant. I'm not really going to talk about the e-waste bill, but we have been pushing for that. Really hope that that can finally get somewhere this year, just given that it's such a big environmental problem, and it also is a local government expense problem with all these fires and having to deal with this waste. A bad aspect of it right now is that there was an amendment made to the bill that would roll back a key policy win from last year, which was the definition of public waters. In Minnesota, just about all the waterways in the state are supposed to be public. That means that they receive certain protections that are in the public interest. And part of that is that they go on this big map inventory that the DNR is supposed to keep to identify those waters. But that map hasn't been updated since the 1980s. And a recent court case determined that it shouldn't really matter whether they're on that map or not. If a water is defined as public in the statute, it's public water. Supreme Court asked the legislature to just clarify that, so they did do that last year. But now the current legislature would roll that back under a provision that was added to this bill, which basically means that we'd be thrown into limbo again. A whole lot of streams throughout the state would suddenly, it's not determined if they're protected or not. So that's something that MEP is opposing and a number of other groups are opposing. We hope to keep that out of the final bill. I think that's all I'll say about the omnibus for now, but I can talk about the mine waste things in a moment. Maybe we just go back to Maria for the waste portions.
Sure. Maria, hi.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. My name is Maria Jensen. I work with Ivana at Clean Water Action and also with RECA, Recycling Electronics for Climate Action, an industry association for electronic waste recyclers. And this year we brought back the electronic waste recycling bill. Very different bill from what we had last session. This basically what the bill does is it asks tells producers of electronics to pay for electronic waste collection and recycling. Because that's one of the biggest barriers right now that is keeping our collection rates low in Minnesota. We only collect about 20% of our electronic waste. Is the cost associated with collection, sorting, shipping, and recycling of this material. So Senate File 1690 is a Senate file in the obviously in the Senate. It is basically that. It's exactly asking the producers to fund this program and increase collection sites around the state. When this bill was first introduced in the House and the Senate, it was quite bipartisan. The House file is authored, the first four names on the House file 1426 are Republicans. And on the Senate file, we originally had 3 Republicans signed on. And the main opposition to this bill are the producers themselves that are being asked to pay, folks like Best Buy, Target, and Google. Actually, Target, I will say, hasn't really showed up this session. They were more opposed to the last year's version of this bill. But yeah, definitely Google, Apple, and Best Buy, and then the associations that represent those folks, like the Chamber of Commerce and oh yeah, just reading the chat. um, yeah, so folks like Chamber of Commerce, CTA, Consumer Technology Association, Rechargeable Batteries Association, Retailers of Minnesota, folks like that. That's the opposition. So they came out really strong against the bill right away when it was introduced and scared off most of our Republican support that we've been working on getting over the past couple of years. Except for we do have one Republican still signed on in the Senate, and that's Senator Abler. So far movement has been no movement in the House. We haven't been able to get a hearing because our House author is just afraid of asking for a hearing and afraid of the kind of maybe bad press that would be associated with going against something that the Chamber of Commerce wants or does not want. And Chair Heisman of the Environment Committee does not like this bill in particular. So no movement yet in the House, and in the Senate we've gone successfully through 3 committees. So we got voted out of the Environment Committee, State and Local, and then Judiciary, and then got sent to Commerce a couple of weeks ago, and we at the last minute decided not to have a vote, just to have it laid over. Because Senator Frentz is still opposed to this bill. He's the only DFLer in both the House and the Senate that is opposed to this bill at this point. So we've been really working on trying to understand what it is that we could do to the bill, if there's some kind of compromise or amendment that would get Senator Frentz's vote so that we could get it voted out of that committee. And that's been pretty difficult because his line has basically been he wants to see peace in the valley, which we just don't see that being possible because we are asking producers to pay for something and they will be happy once the bill no longer makes them pay for something, which is not. So it's a kind of a clash at the heart of what the bill is trying to do. So but we have taken lots of suggestions from producers as far as how the program is run. And tried to cater to them as far as how they would like to run the program, and made several amendments at our different committee stops to that end, but so far it hasn't been enough. Senator Hurd did include it into the Environment Omnibus Bill as it is, fully intact, funding everything, collection for everything with a battery, a cord, or a circuit board. But Senator Klein would like it to come back to the Commerce Committee for a vote. So I'm not sure, to be honest. Somebody else on this call may be able to say what this actually means. I'm less of a policy wonk than probably most of you, but Senator Klein wants that to come back because he kind of promised when we did have a hearing a couple weeks ago, he promised that committee, Senator Green and Senator Frentz, that it would come back so they could discuss it more and have a vote. So I'm not sure exactly if push comes to shove, if it will get pulled out of the Environment Committee if we do not go back to, or sorry, out of the Environment Omnibus Bill if we do not go back for that vote in Commerce Committee. It was scheduled for a hearing tomorrow, but there was a caucus scheduling conflict. So the idea is to reschedule it for a vote in Commerce. And we think we're getting closer to understanding what Frentz would vote yes for, as far as what version, what we would have to do to this bill to make him vote for it. There's been some conversation about splitting the bill up, as far as like kind of down the lines of different types of material, whether it's batteries and battery containing devices on one side and circuit board containing devices without a battery on the other side, something like that. Things like that have been suggested, and we think we're making some progress there. So it's still, there's a lot hanging in the air right now, really unknown as far as Senator Frentz's position, because he's been very hard to pin down with what he would be willing to vote for. So so far it is still in the omnibus bill, but the situation is fluid. So happy to answer questions. Again, lots of folks on this call are more familiar with this part of the process than I am, so they may be able to pitch into.
So, okay, so at some point it's gonna go to Commerce with
Right.
Klein, who is tight with Friends.
Yeah, Klein is, yeah, but he likes the bill, so he's been advocating for it for us, and he's been very helpful with getting Frentz to the table. And a couple of weeks ago we had a big meeting with Senator Frentz and Senator Kupek, who's the primary author, and probably 15 industry lobbyists. So Frentz got to see kind of the nature of their pushback, which is really just that, it's really just, they're just saying, we don't like it, we don't like it. They're not really offering anything. So we did want him to see that, because he's been telling us to compromise, but we're really negotiating against ourselves at this point, because the producers are not offering alternatives. They're just saying no. They're just saying no to it. So at least he got to see that, and I think that might have contributed to him being more open to hearing our ideas of not compromising the bill, but making significant changes to show that we're listening to industry. So
Thank
and
you. Go ahead.
I'll put a call to action in the chat too.
Excellent, that would be great. And on the House side, if I share my screen real quickly here. Let's see, are you seeing my screen, folks? Screen 2? No, let me try
Not
again.
yet.
Not anymore.
Okay, I might have hit the wrong button. Let's try that. Okay. On the House side, there are no policy provisions, like you said, Maria, right? So e-waste is not in there. But we're watching for amendments that we don't want added there. And maybe this won't be an issue, but we're worried about increasing the weight limit for ATV vehicles. We're worried about also funding to expand off-road vehicle trails, right? And there's a great action alert here. Greg, can you put it in the chat from Minnesota Public Lands Coalition to kind of explain what we want to watch for, that doesn't get included? And then the good news is, well, the bad news is there's cuts to several agencies here involved with the House version of this bill. And I don't know if Matt or anyone wants to say any more about the budget cuts here. But I know that agencies testified that this was an issue.
It's
All
not
right.
been an area of big focus for me, but certainly we don't want to see these kinds of cuts, because investing in water infrastructure or prairie restoration are things that will pay off for us down the line. So it's really about investments.
Climate resiliency is kind of important, right, as we deal with this stuff. So none of it should be cut. And Ivana, you wanted to talk about the PFAS and other things that we want to make sure that they're not rolling back Amara's law, right? So let's turn it over to you, and I will stop sharing.
All right, I have a couple of, am I able to share? There we go. All right. So Just as a quick reminder, there's a couple different phases of Amara's Law. As of the first of this year, the prohibition on the consumer products has gone into place. So that's carpets, rugs, cleaning products, cookware, everything that you see on this list. The next step is anything that the MPCA determines as not being intentionally added. So, like if you have, so for example, clothing is not on this list, and we all saw the news with the Lululemon leggings had high levels of PFAS. So, if you're not on this list, you have to convince the MPCA that your product is essential. So Lululemon will have to go to the MPCA and prove that their product is essential for the health, safety, and functioning of society. And it's up to the MPCA then to determine whether or not that product is essential. So that's kind of where we're starting from. So this is happening across the country too. So when Minnesota passed Amara's Law, we have the most comprehensive law in the country and really in the world. So there are states across the country that are trying to mimic what we've been doing, which is really great news. But the chemical industry, the American Chemistry Council, all the usual suspects are bopping around the country trying to expand the definition from one fluorinated carbon atom to two fluorinated carbon atoms, which allows gases and all sorts of things to fall through a loophole and not be considered a PFAS. So we're holding firm on the definition. The House in particular has just been wonderful in defending Amara's Law. We haven't seen as much pushback on the definition in Minnesota as I really expected. Knock on wood, cross all your fingers and toes now that I've said that. But there have been other types of carve outs. So Heinzman and well, it was Acorn. It's not, nothing's happening in the Senate now, but what I thought was the most egregious push was to exempt industry and manufacturers from having to abide by Amara's Law. And my response to that was, we are in this mess because of industry and manufacturing. And we are in this mess because industry dumped. So to exempt them completely guts this bill. Thankfully, that language is not going anywhere. Heinzman and Housechild are pushing for exemptions on ATVs. This started with Natalie Zelensnikar. It's after 6 o'clock, so it's hard for me to hold back my thoughts on people with my facial expressions. Or after work hours, we're all friends. Went on social media and was saying that the bill wasn't well thought out. It wasn't common sense. We need to exempt ATVs. And it really started from this gentleman who runs a ATV dealership. And I actually have the emails up on my bulletin board. The dates that Honda emailed him 12/20 of 2024, so just before the January 1 implementation date, and Yamaha was January 3rd, 2025, so 2 days after the implementation date. And these Honda and Yamaha were basically like, yeah, you can't sell the stuff in Minnesota anymore, so you're going to have to figure it out. Some of the solutions that they offered was that the dealerships at their own cost would move the items out of state to be sold, return them to the manufacturers under dealership costs, all sorts of things. So Senator Seeberger and I pulled this gentleman in. We had a really great conversation with him. We explained to him that, like, listen, that your trade associations, the chamber, your manufacturers, Yamaha and Honda, they knew in 2023 this was happening. And this poor gentleman looked like he was going to cry. And he said, I am a pawn in their game. And all I could say was, yes, sir, you are. And I'm really sorry. How can we help you? So, the exemptions on ATVs, it's not just about ATVs. It's about trying to find a chink in the armor and pull down the whole law. Let's be really clear that this is what this is about. And the industry knows that if Minnesota moves backwards, if we fall at all, they're going to be able to run around to every other state and say Minnesota is failing. And I'm already zooming into Montana Oregon, Vermont, states across the country, the legislatures are asking me to come in and explain how is Minnesota implementing, because they have lobbyists in front of their faces lying to them saying Minnesota is failing, you shouldn't try anything that they're doing. So that's why they're trying to find that chink in the armor. Refineries wanted more time, and we caught them in a pretty blatant lie. Representative Norris is wonderful and called and said, the refinery wants more time. Will you meet with me and them? And they showed us all these really frightening videos and photos of this huge fire in Louisiana at a refinery, but they wouldn't actually give me the information. They wouldn't let me vet it myself or take the data to talk to any of our neutral scientists. So we found a very similar fire. They claimed that this is the only fire that has happened globally where they could really assess PFAS. And we ended up that night, I got on the phone with Australia, a firefighter from Australia. And it's really important that everyone knows that every single ExxonMobil location in Australia is PFAS free. Every single oil rig in the sea in Australia is PFAS free. And all the firefighting crews in Australia is PFAS free. And they have been for over a decade. So we have to start to look at this through a global lens, because the industry here in the States is not telling us the entire truth. So going back to ATVs, the MPCA put forward some recommended language, and we are not opposing the recommended language. We're not excited about it, but we're not opposing it. And the reason we're not opposing it is because we have to ensure that this law is implementable. If we can't implement this law, that gives industry everything they need to run around the country and say Minnesota's failing. You should just not even try. The issue we have is that the MPCA recommendation is in both the environment and the commerce omnibus bills in the Senate. We want the environment version because the commerce version has this little extra bit that's highlighted in orange that redefines what a juvenile product is to exempt ATVs. It's redundant language. When I testified on ATVs, I was very clear that MPCA language pushes internal components and electronics to the 2032 deadline. The way the ATV language stands now, it would be a forever exemption. There's no incentive to find safer alternatives for those dangerous components in ATVs. The part of the ATV that has the PFAS is the internal component and the electronic component. So this simply moves the MPCA language simply moves juvenile ATVs from 2025 to 2032. Do I love it? No, but is it better than the alternative? It is. I want to point out section 5 because this really, if you don't know the backstory, I can understand why people are clutching their pearls and asking what the hell I'm thinking. So we have a very unique situation in Minnesota with Delta Airlines. My mom retired from the airlines, spent her entire career in HR with the maintenance teams. And so I had lots of conversations with maintenance crews in airports across the country. And the situation that we're in Minnesota is because Delta in Minnesota is the second largest maintenance base in the world, and it's in the old Northwest Airlines infrastructure building. They just physically couldn't meet the timeline. And when they walked us through, we did a tour of the facility and we walked through each of the individual hangars, and we kept joking that the hangar building was older than me, so we knew it was old. When for the amount of time each hangar took, they needed that additional 12 months to finish on time. They started immediately. They've been doing their safety protocol checks. One of the good things that has come out of this is as they're going through and looking at how they're switching over all of their firefighting foam, they're realizing they might not even need to use foam at all, that they might be able to use water way more often than they originally suspected. So I just have to say, Section 5 is really meant for Delta Airlines, but they have been a true partner in this work since day one. They wanted to be on time. We wanted them to be on time, but we also can't have a situation where the largest airline in the entire state is a year behind schedule because, again, then we have all of the lobbyists running around the country going, Minnesota couldn't implement. Delta has voluntarily switched over in other states. They've completely switched over in Oregon. It just has to do with the size of their hangar. And we've been in constant communications with them. We're getting updates from them. They're working really closely with the MPCA. So that's really what Section 5 is about. We are not, bending to the refineries or anything else. We just want to help them be good partners in this. And then we've got the plastic bag preemption repeal. There's a bill supporting the creation of PFAS-free alternatives, which is really a neat bill. As we were talking about earlier, phthalates in food, data centers, and then there is a bipartisan bill addressing lead and arsenic in period products. So that's kind of where we are at with particularly PFAS. We do have some really fun events coming up that I can send you, Vida, to send out to the crew, but I'm around for questions if anybody has any.
Thank you. Can you put a link to, you had shared with me some action alerts. If you want to put a link to them in the
Yes.
chat, I think that would be awesome.
Sure
Thank you so
can.
much. Okay, and because of time, I'm sorry, but we need to move on to transportation. So if you have questions for Ivana, please put it in the chat and we'll try to come back to it in a little bit, okay? Thank you so much. Peter, let's move on to the transportation omnibus. I know you have a lot to say about this one.
Great. Thank you, Vida. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm going to start by putting a letter into the chat, which the DFL Environmental Caucus signed on to, and I really appreciate it. And I'll refer back to this because it shows how our message to Democrats is a little bit different to our message to everyone. The letter I put in the chat is a message to Democrats. As you all know, we passed historic climate laws in 2023, particularly for the energy and transportation sectors. We helped drive support. We, including Sierra Club and the DFL Environmental Caucus, helped educate the public about the significance of those bills. And so now polluters and anti-environment legislators have proposed large rollbacks to the progress we made on climate. And those rollbacks on climate specifically are concentrated in two bills, the Senate Omnibus Energy Bill, which they already talked about, and the House Omnibus Transportation Bill. I'll get into the details of why the Senate bill is so bad on energy, and it's the House bill that's so bad on transportation. But the bottom line is because the House is tied. It's because the House is tied. So what's the situation? Let me go to the substance first, and then I'll talk about the politics. The substance of this, transportation is the #1 source of climate pollution. And the two biggest things we did in 2023 is we funded alternatives that would allow people to drive less. Big funding, historic funding we had wanted for decades in for transit, biking, and walking infrastructure. And I would put the fact that that was being targeted in the category of expected. I'll get to unexpected in a minute. I say expected only because there is a budget deficit this year, and we knew that this was going to be targeted pretty early on because unfortunately Governor Walz participated in putting a target on it. He proposed in January in his budget repealing 100% of state funding from the general fund for transit and walking and biking in the metropolitan area. We had hoped that, and I put the letter that we all signed on this issue back in January. We pointed out, amongst other things, that our major objection was that that's terrible for the climate. But it was also strange that it was only the metro area that was being targeted for cuts. Well, in his revised budget, Governor Walz fixed that in exactly the wrong way. Instead of not targeting the metro area for cuts, he added new cuts to Greater Minnesota Transit in his revised budget in February. That is not the way to fix the inequity in his original proposal. But nonetheless, we were expecting those cuts. After all, they've got to leave room in their budget for massive tax cuts, tax subsidies for data centers for Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. That's a little frustrating. We don't actually think this is necessary. If they cut the tax credit for data centers, they would have enough money to not cut the transit funding 3 times over, transit, walking, and biking. So that was the expected cut. And unfortunately, there are cuts to transit, walking, and biking in the metro area in both the Senate and House bill. But it's far worse in the House bill. And it's not just cuts to transit, walking, and biking in the metro area in the House bill. Those cuts are larger. They are also cutting active transportation statewide. But then let's talk about the unexpected cuts. We knew that because there's a budget deficit, there would be proposals to cut funding. But we got a heads up last Tuesday from Larry Kraft that the Republicans were also going after the climate impact of highways law, sometimes called driving down emissions. The bottom line, what is that law? That is the law that we passed in 2023 that requires the Minnesota Department of Transportation to adhere to both greenhouse gas emission reduction targets and vehicle miles traveled reduction targets. We have the best bill in the nation on this. There's only 2 states that have actually done this. Colorado, which passed a greenhouse gas emission reduction target, but even they don't have a vehicle miles traveled reduction target. We have both. And the House Republicans wanted to delay it by 3.5 years, as if we have an extra 3.5 years to keep building massive highway expansions, regardless of whether or not they hurt the climate or not. And of course they do. To be clear, the way that MnDOT adheres to this is they can redesign a project so it doesn't increase emissions. They could pair it with good projects that reduce emissions, reduce vehicle miles traveled, or they could cancel the project. Well, it's safe to say that the road lobby freaked out about this. And unfortunately, the road lobby includes building trades, Democratic or building trades that donate, not exclusively, but donate to Democratic campaigns. So last Tuesday, we learned that they were including this 3.5-year delay of the greenhouse gas and vehicle miles traveled reduction targets in the bill. And it was Larry Kraft and Katie Jones who developed that bill in the first place who gave us a heads up. Here's why I say it was unexpected, because it has nothing to do with the budget. It has nothing to do with the budget. And Hortman had done a good job. She had already gotten a commitment that we weren't going to trade policy for money. We weren't going to trade policy for budget. So why is this thing in here? Well, I'm skeptical of the role of LIUNA and the building trades behind the scenes. But I think for the most part, the major explanation here is not that there's a malicious entity or malicious senator like Nick Friends. I think the real problem is the Democrats in the House just did a terrible job negotiating this. Remember how you heard a minute ago, Patty Aiken said, hey, we'd be fine with a lights on bill. That's the right attitude, and that's good negotiating by Patty Aiken. We established the status quo in 2023 by passing good bills. So the House Democrats should have done the same thing and said, hey, we don't need a bill. We're fine with the status quo. But they didn't do that. They allowed the negotiation to be between their position and the most wild, outlandish proposals of the House Republicans. And they ended up with this terrible bill. So where do we stand right now? Well, the House Transportation Bill passed out of the Transportation Committee with all the Republicans voting for it, all 8, and a majority of Democrats voted no. It happened again today. It passed out of taxes. All the Republicans voted for it, and a majority of Democrats voted no. This is our objective now. Our objective is to make sure that when it comes to the House floor next week, a strong majority, as many Democrats as possible, vote no. As a practical matter, 2 Democrats are going to feel the need to vote for this because they were in the room for the negotiation. I find that extraordinarily frustrating, but they feel obligated because even though I think they know they got smoked in this negotiation, they feel the need to stand by the agreement. But that's dangerous. That's really dangerous in conference committee because it relies on the Senate Democrats to just stop everything. And we don't have that confidence when the Senate has a 1-vote majority and you have people like Nick Friends and Matt Klein and John Hoffman walking around. So we want to get as many Democrats as possible to vote no on the House floor because that sends a better message going into the conference committee. And what you run into sometimes is habit and culture. Habit and culture says, well, we're Democrats. We're supposed to stick with Democratic chairs. You know, we have the majority. And if the majority, no, we don't have the majority. And she's not the chair. She's the co-chair. It's unusual circumstances and we need to react in unusual ways. The best of all possible worlds is every Democrat we can find votes no. So it's really clear to everybody. The only people who want this are the House Republicans. So in that letter that I shared at the beginning, I just wanted to note that it almost sounds like we're implying, well, let me just read a piece of it. It says the proposed rollbacks in the Senate Energy and House Transportation bills are policy issues, not related to the budget deficit. They are unnecessary as a matter of policy and politics. And we wrote, the federal government is aggressively reversing climate action, and the public is extremely frustrated that Democrats seem powerless to defend our environmental laws because Republicans in Washington control both the House and the Senate. But Republicans do not control either body of the state legislature. Legislators are not powerless. They can prevent these rollbacks of essential climate action simply by voting no. You might say, are we implying that Democrats need to find their spines? You bet we are. That's exactly, we're trying to tap into the zeitgeist, how people are feeling, and make Democrats understand you will be thought of as weak between us friends like Schumer. Wouldn't you rather be thought of as strong like AOC or Bernie or Chris Murphy or Cory Booker, people who are standing up and fighting? Be on the side of people who are standing up and fighting. Not everybody can be with an implicitly partisan message like this. So I want to end by saying there is one more thing that we'd love people to do, which is because that previous letter talked about both the Senate energy bill and the House transportation bill being really bad. And it didn't include all of the bad things because we were operating on intel before seeing the bill. There's a new letter, and I'll put it in the chat. And I would invite everybody who can, including the DFL Environmental Caucus, but any other organizations you're involved in, to sign on to this letter as well. And you can do that by emailing me or MJ Carpio at Move Minnesota.
Excellent. Thank you, Peter. Yes, this came about very quickly today, this letter. And so we need Chair Megan to take a look at it, and I'm sure that we will want to sign on. But so the number one thing that I'm hearing from you that we need everyone to do at this point is that this bill has been through Ways and Means, the House version. So it's going to go to the House floor for a vote at some point. I don't know if it'll be this week or next week. We don't really know, right? But
probably
now,
early next week. It's gone through transportation and taxes. It goes through Ways and Means on Wednesday.
okay.
And so it's going to be after Wednesday. It's most likely it'll be early next week. But it could be Friday. We can't predict them.
Okay, so this week or early next week, we need people to reach out to their representatives in the Minnesota House to tell them to vote no on the House transportation bill.
Yep.
And use this letter we've shared with Y, but we're going to send out action alerts with details on all this. Excellent. Thank you very much. All right, any quick questions go ahead. Go ahead, Peter.
Peter, if I could just share one other thing. I don't want to belabor it now, but I would like to just flag for folks that we try not to just play defense, even when circumstances demand it. And we are also participating in a coalition with Isaiah and the Minnesota Housing Partnership and SEIU and progressive unions on land use reforms, which would put a stop to metropolitan sprawl. Turns out metropolitan sprawl is so much worse than we even thought before. When green space at the periphery of the region is torn down for the sake of single family homes on huge lots, it's an environmental disaster in so many ways because every new resident is really far away from their destinations. They have to drive the maximum possible number of miles. And we've lost the green space that was sequestering carbon. I could go through a longer list, but it looks like the land use reforms bills are not moving through this year. And I want And if there's time later, I know we got to get through the agenda. I'd love to speak to that maybe at a future meeting since it's not going forward this year. But it is a place where most of the Democrats are overwhelmingly on board. But in other regions, we've needed a handful of Republican votes in low wealth communities to make up for not having votes in high wealth Democratic areas. And I'd love to speak about that at a future meeting.
Excellent. That sounds great. Well, we do a number of these. This is our 7th forum this year on legislative issues, and there will be more. I'm going to move us along, if I may, just out of time, because I know this gets to be long. So let me share my screen here again and switch over here. So this slide just summarizes, let me get it to slideshow. Okay, this summarizes what Peter was saying and is also in the document that we put in the chat, some of the issues with this House bill. And I want you to look at that last bullet point, which Phil pointed out, was also brought up today. It raises the vehicle fee to $200. It was $75, which is quite a raise. So it does seem like people out there have something with electric stuff in our state. I don't know why. But for sure, we want to, again, write and say we oppose this bill. I'd like to talk briefly about the ag omnibus bill, and I would like anyone who knows more about it than me to speak up. But what I've read is that it calls for $17 million increase in their budget, which is a good thing when we're seeing other budgets being cut. And it will include $3 million for the farm to school program. This was, Rick was saying there were compromises made. This is an evenly split committee and we didn't get everything we want and the Republicans didn't get everything they want. But because of federal cuts in farm to school program, this was one of the things that Rick wanted to make sure was included. There's also money for pollinator research and other things that we care about that are part of this bill. And one of the things we'd like to see added, you may have seen an action alert from Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy, is to add $7 million for Southeast Minnesota's well mitigation. They have an ongoing issue with nitrates in their well water. And this is the place where it would get added to the budget, most likely, is the ag omnibus bill. So if we can find $7 million more, people living that have private wells do not have, like if you're on city water, they test your city water, right? They're responsible for making sure, hopefully, that you have clean water. But if you have a private well, it's all on you. And a lot of people don't know what their nitrate contamination is, or they're seeing it going up each year and they don't know how to treat it or they don't have the funds. So that is what this would be used for. And I put a picture here of Jeff Broberg. I'm not sure if you guys know Jeff. He's well known in the environmental community, but he lives in the karst region. He's been living with this water all his life, and he just died from pancreatic cancer 2 weeks after his diagnosis. And one of the things I've heard Jeff speak about is that 10 parts per million nitrates, yes, that's the standard for blue baby syndrome, but at much lower levels, it is contributing to cancer. And he had much higher nitrates in his water than that. And furthermore, some of you will know about synergistic effect. When you have two things acting together, sometimes the effect is much worse than individually. And here in this high, a region that's heavily farmed and feedlotted, there is also a lot of pesticides in the water. And this having the nitrates and the pesticides together, again, makes a much higher risk for cancer. So let's push them to do it for Jeff, okay? In honor of Jeff, who lost his life to cancer, just as we're pushing for PFAS rollbacks, keeping it out for Amara. And so we want to end here really with a call to action. And before I do that, though, maybe Matt, you want to talk briefly about the whole mine waste and sulfate thing. This is back. I can jump back if you like to environment. I think we jumped over
Sure.
this.
Yeah, and this kind of came up in multiple different areas. Basically, what happened was there's been an attempt this session by certain legislators who are very pro-mining to roll back rules on sulfate as it affects wild rice waters. Sulfate is a chemical. It's a byproduct of mining, for example, that when it reacts with mercury in the water, it creates this huge problem for wild rice, kills it quite quickly, along with affecting fish and eventually people who consume those fish. So that's one rollback that they like to do because the sulfate standard really hasn't. It's been on the books for quite a while, hasn't ever really been enforced until they recently. The MPCA has made some steps toward enforcement, but so that it's become an industry target because they don't want to do anything to reduce their sulfate because that's expensive, and that's kind of where that comes from. The reactive mine waste, that's referring to waste from something like a polymet or a twin metals, where it's going to be non-iron mining, where it's going to be sulfide ores, copper, nickel, and basically that rule is restricts how you can, handle that waste. It's a big part of why at least one of Polymet's permits was overturned in court. So another top target for the mining industry and their legislative backers. There was an attempt earlier this session to attach this to a bill for unemployment benefits for laid off miners. And certainly we support those benefits, but tying them together makes no sense. It's putting a policy where helping out laid off workers should just sail on its own. Unfortunately, thanks to Representative Pete Johnson of Duluth, in large part, there was a bill, a clean bill on the unemployment benefits that did pass out of committee. So we're hoping it just continues that way and that we don't see these provisions this session, but we're keeping an eye out.
Matt, I do have some information on that.
Oh, good.
To my knowledge, up here in our neck of the woods, because somebody is responsible for what that was, he's going to change that. So it should be separate.
Great.
In both chambers.
Perfect.
Excellent. All right, super. Thank you. Just checking the chat here. Okay, I'm going to move us forward then to just kind of sum it up here. Lost my thing. So our call to action, Greg and I will get something out to you here probably tomorrow, Greg. That will hopefully have a video of this presentation and some slides. Any of my presenters, if there's anything you would like included with our message, please let me know. We're happy to share slides or handouts that you have. Peter, I think I already have what you shared. Thank you. And if you don't know who represents you, we've shared this before. This is an easy place you can look up who is your House member, who is your senator. You can look up different committees, so Ways and Means, Taxes, the different committees that these bills are moving through. A lot of them are no longer taking testimony, but some of them I've seen you can submit written testimony. So you have to basically look at that combined calendar to see if there's still a chance for input. But everyone can write to your legislator, right? And let them know what you think. And also we'll need calls to the governor eventually if some of this bad policy gets through to ask him to veto it. When you make phone calls, please make sure that you're specific and narrowly focused. It doesn't help if you're rude. You really do need to be polite, but be assertive about what you want. Identify yourself, please, as a constituent if you do live in their district. If not, you can say, I'm a member of the Environmental Caucus and I'm concerned about provisions, chair friends, that I understand are in your bill, right? Please do that. That is welcomed. You can also make committee, making calls, as we mentioned, are going to be important. And you may end up leaving a message, often with their LA, legislative assistants. If you have time to meet with your representative or senator, please call the legislative assistant, make an appointment, show up, talk to them. They represent you and they should be making time to do that. If you need help with how to do that, I'm happy to help you with that process. But you want to talk to them and try to find some common grounds, some reasons for them to support the bill or to not support the bill that you both agree on, right? You won't prove them wrong, but maybe you can find that nugget of what you both care about that might be convincing. I did also want to just mention that tomorrow we will be joining, there's about 15 different environmental groups that'll be at the Capitol for Earth Day. Now that I'm retired, I can be there too, and we'll be in the rotunda because of the rain. There'll be speakers and tabling, and we'll have our environmental caucus banner displayed there, and handouts, pins. If you didn't get a pin yet, stop by the table. We'd love to see you.
And Vita, you're one of the speakers, right?
Sorry, I
You're
am
one
one
of-
of the speakers. Yes, I am, and I'm going to do my best to get my channel my inner cheerleader, and we're going to do some chants. But with that, I do want to also invite you all to join us. If you just go to our website, and maybe you want to throw this in the chat, Greg, DFL Environmental Caucus, to join us. We would love to have you become a member. It's very easy, doesn't cost anything. We love donations, but there's no real dues. And that gets you on our email list so that we can keep in touch. And when we do more of these forums and other things like endorsements, you'll be aware.
Phil
And
has his hand raised, Vita.
hi, Phil. Yes.
Hi. I just want to point out that there were 42 letters to the tax committee today, written testimony against the EV tax. So,
Wow. Love
Yeah.
it. Yes. And you were one of the
So-
testifiers. So thank
Yeah.
you, Phil. All right. And I really want to thank everybody for coming. If there are any last minute questions, we can try to answer.
I'd like to point
I
something
do-
out quickly,
Yes.
which is just that we are seeing in this session, partly because we're so close, that even a little bit of pushback on the part of Democrats against good environmental legislation that they may do for reasons that they honestly think are good reasons, but we do not support, can really cause us to take really serious steps backwards. And I think just give them the benefit of the doubt. They're putting together all the information they have from all the constituents, all the people they talk to, all the forces that work on them, and this is a conclusion that they are coming up with. What we need to do is make them come up with a different kind of conclusion. And one way to do that is that it's probably true already, but is everybody here a delegate to your Senate district? And if you're not, you need to be, okay? Because that's where you get to pick who our candidates are. Okay, if we want to have better Democrats, we have to find them, support them, and put them in place. And that means getting them the local party endorsement. So Environmental Caucus does endorse candidates, and we're hoping people donate us money so that we can start giving more money to candidates we support. But you in your own district need to go to your caucus and become a delegate and go to your Senate district and support the environmentally better and excellent House and Senate candidates. So we don't have to have some of the conversations we're having now. It's a long process. And when you do that, you should be absolutely strict in your conversations with those people. Once you're a caucus member, you know what you get to be when you're a delegate. The payoff is you get free coffee. All you have to do is call up that candidate and say, we're having coffee tomorrow, and they're going to have to be there. Okay, you own them at that moment. In their life and your life, you own them. Okay, and you can converse with them. You can tell them where you are at and what you insist on. And they have to hear that from a lot of people, not just one or two. So everybody has to be in a given Senate district, House district, and House zone, you could get 15 or 20 people to show up that weren't there before. It can become the most important thing that they hear as they're shaping their policy. And I would say everything I just said applies as well to any issue that's important to you, such as universal health care, whatever. You can make that the policy that those people support because you're telling them to. That's your chance to do it. So please, if you're not a delegate, go to your caucuses next February and become a delegate. You absolutely have to do that. I know most
right,
people
good.
probably already are.
Excellent. And I want to thank our presenters tonight.
I do have a couple questions that came in. If
very
we could just take a couple minutes, if anyone would be okay. with that, just going to
And
more
a lot
minutes.
of our presenters have left, but
Well,
you can
there's for a couple that are here still,
go
actually.
for it. All right.
All right, Peter, this is a question for you. Who were the DFLers that were involved in some of these negotiations that, seem to be responsible for some of these going badly that people might be interested in reaching out to speak about this? Or if you're still here, I think I saw you're still here.
Sure. So our previous House Transportation Chair retired. That was Frank Hornstein. He was the one who shepherded the great 2023 bill. As far as I'm aware, the two folks who were involved in this negotiation were the new Transportation Chair, Aaron Cagle. And at some point when they saw that things were not going well, Brad Tabke was brought in to also participate in the negotiation. I will say I happen to know that something similar happened on the Republican side, which is that John Kosnick was quote unquote not doing well, and he was kind of subbed in by with Bjorn Olson, a different Republican. But the definition of not doing well for Kosnick on the Republican side and for Cagle on the Democratic side, I would describe as different. It was not good for Cagle because she was losing in the negotiation. It was not good for Kosnick because he was just such an incredible jerk, like screaming at Aaron Cagle that well, let me just say it this way. I don't think John Kosnick can handle being around women where he has to treat them as an equal. That's his MO. I'm giving you my honest opinion in a private conversation. I think I would encourage people to mostly focus on other legislators other than Aaron Cagle and Brad Tabke, because I don't think either of them feel good about how this turned out. I wish the leadership had provided better support to a new chair. But I think our most successful path is by talking to other folks. They already feel bad. Aaron Cagle walked out and said, everybody hates me. But she does feel obligated to vote for the package moving forward.
Thanks, Peter.
She's not trying to, I want to be really clear. She's not trying to do the wrong thing in the way that Nick Friends is like obviously carrying water for Republican bills and polluting interests. It's not the same as the Senate energy bill.
Thanks so much, Peter.
Thank you. Want to wrap it up here?
Yeah. So just want to say, so one other question came in, but it's for me, so never mind. First, I want to say thanks for everyone for being here. It's a great turnout again, as always. And just stay on your representatives between now and the end of session. And if there's a special session, which I'm just kind of planning on, but you never know what might happen in the next few weeks, Okay, well, thanks for everyone for being here.
Thank you all. Thank you, Peter. And I want to give a shout out too to Owen Small, who's on. He's been doing wonderful work with Rise and Repair also. It's been great to team with him and many people that are on this Zoom. So thank you all for coming.
Yeah.
And
okay.
we'll get that action alert out soon.
Right. All right.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Good night.
Always good to see you. And I did